Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about different types of ceilings and some ceiling repair. And we'd like to thank Stuart Jeremy for liking and sharing the podcast. Tin ceilings were first used in the U.S. in the 1800s to eliminate all the work involved with plastering ceilings. They're lightweight, they were easy to install, and fireproof. And many of these had very intricate patterns that they stamped into the steel or the tin that they were using. And a lot of these first ceilings were just painted white to reflect more light. In the 1930s, the popularity started to fade with the tin ceilings.
Bummer.
In Japan, in the 1300s, they started creating these ceiling tiles and creating drop ceilings. And in 1596, the Blackfriars Theatre in London used a drop ceiling with acoustical tiles to control the sound and echo.
Nice.
If you have a drywall ceiling and you've got a couple of nail pops, I would just take a hammer and pound those back in.
Are you going to explain what a nail pop is?
So a nail
Not
pop.
all of our listeners listen to every episode.
So if you had a builder who used a hammer and nails, or if you're in an older home and somebody replaced the ceiling and they used a hammer and nails, over time those nails can work themselves loose and it'll create like a bubble through the drywall, the face of the paper, and the paint. And so you've got this thing popping out. All you have to do is pound that back. If you have multiple nails that are popping through, then what I would do is use a stud finder. I'd find the joist.
That would kind of be a problem, right? If all your nails are working.
Right. Yeah, a little scary. And I would run a couple drywall screws on either side of that nail, slightly dimpling the screws. You don't want to break through the paper face of the drywall because that will reduce the strength of the screws. You're going to pound that nail in and then just use a lightweight spackle. It's not going to sag or drip out from the ceiling, which is really nice. They dry fast. There's very little shrinking. Let that dry, and it depends on the spackle. Some will dry in a couple of hours. Some, you might want to wait overnight.
Well, some of them are like pink when they
right,
go on.
yeah,
and
which is very handy.
They turn white when they dry.
Exactly. I would take a damp sponge then and just smooth that lightly. If it looks like it shrank a little bit or you need to apply a little more compound, then just a very thin coat over the top of that. But you should be able to very quickly fill those indentations that you created, and then you're able to prime and paint and make those disappear. For cracks in ceilings that are drywall, I would use a compound tape to cover that crack to prevent it from reappearing. So first what I do is take a scraper and dig out the crack to kind of open it up, and you want to also remove any loose particles. So I would scrape all over it. You're going to fill that crack with compound, and then you want to cover that crack with about 1/8 of an inch of joint compound with a 6-inch compound knife. You're going to want to put the width of the knife all the way over the crack, and then you're going to put this drywall tape over it. You're going to press that tape into the compound, pulling off the excess. I like working with 2 knives, pulling and then scraping the excess off to the second knife, or you could use a mud pan to wipe off the excess. But you want
to go to our YouTube channel because there's a gazillion drywall videos that we've done, drywall repair videos.
Right.
But we did a nice one on my ceiling in the bathroom. There was a compound tape around, around the
fan, the exhaust fan?
That somebody before didn't, you could see the actual compound tape, I think.
Right, yeah, so, pulled it off and redid it. But what you want to do is you only want to leave about 1/16 of an inch of compound under that tape, and then you're going to put a very thin coating over the top of it, pull it smooth, and then let it fully dry. Once it's dry, you're going to use the compound knife and just lightly scrape over the tape to knock down any particles that were left. Then you're going to take a damp sponge and smooth that. But then you're going to apply a second coat, very thin, and you're going to want to use a knife that's a little bit wider. So the easiest for most people to control is a 10-inch wide knife. 12 inches better, but it takes a little more practice getting used to it. But you're extending that second coat a couple of inches past that first one so that you're getting this nice feathered bead over that compound tape. You're going to feather it, let it dry, and then again use your compound knife or a damp sponge, knock down any particles or knife marks, and then you're going to put a third coat over this, extending a couple inches wider on both sides from your second coat, and feather that, let it dry. And once you sand this lightly with a damp sponge, that tape will completely disappear.
Right, so this is a couple day project because everything has to dry overnight.
Right. If you have cracks in a plaster ceiling, you can use plaster washers and drywall screws all along both sides of the crack, and you're screwing into the lath or the joists. And if you miss, I would remove that screw and move it over slightly. You're trying to find wood. So in a plaster ceiling, you have these strips of lath, so tiny pieces of wood that they put between the joists. And then when they put that first coat of plaster, it's oozing between those strips of wood, and that's what holds it in place from falling on your head. So it's pretty interesting how they do it. That those pieces of lath have to be spaced perfectly, and they have to force enough up there so it creates these keys, they call them, to hold it in place. So it's really an art form to it. But what you want to do is you want
and
to...
hopefully they were a good artist that
right,
put it up.
Right. Well, you'll tell depending on how much is falling away from your ceiling. And once you get all these screws and these washers on both sides of the crack, and these washers have a little dimple in it for the screw head to set into, most professionals are either going to go over this with a very thin screening, or you can just use regular compound tape, go over this, and then just like we talked about just in that crack in drywall, you're going to use that same technique of putting 3 thin coats over it, feather it out, and that crack will disappear. If you have a plaster ceiling and it's sagging, so you have areas that are pulling away, let's say a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch away from that lath, you're going to want to knock out those sections. So you can knock it free with a hammer, and then you can use a painter's 3-in-1 tool or a putty knife and square that up so you can float a piece of drywall in there. And that old plaster, the thickness may not be exactly, a standard 1/2 inch or 5/8 to your drywall. So you may have to add furring strips or build it up with compound for these small patches.
Okay.
If you have large areas or the whole ceiling looks pretty bad, it's cracked, you might want to cover the whole ceiling with a thin 1/4 inch drywall, or like a company like Sheetrock has a 1/2 inch lightweight drywall. So they have something called ultralight, and it's 30% lighter than a standard drywall sheet, and so
nice.
Much easier for ceilings.
Right.
And some pros, what they're going to do is they're going to mark the joists and then screw on furring strips, especially if you have a bad cracked and maybe a wavy ceiling, and this is going to give you kind of a level area to screw onto. You can also just knock out sections that are loose and then shim the exposed joists to the same depth of the plaster. That way you're going to create a flush surface to put your drywall up on. You want to mark your joists and then just screw your drywall right over the plaster. And you can use a deep scan stud finder for plaster, but kind of an easy new scanner is this Metallus scanner from Zircon. So it's Zircon, because a lot of scanners have a hard time going through the plaster, then the lath to find the different density of the joists.
Right.
So with this Metallus scanner, it's finding all of these nails that were put into the joists. So when it shows you that you found a nail, as you work along, you're going to find a straight line, so that's your joist, and then you mark them. So it actually does a very nice job for that. To put up sheets of drywall on the ceiling, we would always create like these T-posts out of wood. So we take 2x4s and make kind of a frame, and then we would take a couple guys and push it up and hold it. It was always a project, man. And you want to cut them a little bit longer so you can wedge this onto the floor as you're working with ladders and having a couple guys help you lift this up.
Sounds safe.
Yeah. It was always an exciting project to do. Or for $30 or $40, you can go to a home center and you can rent a drywall lift. So this has a frame that holds a sheet of drywall, and it rotates, and then you just lift it up with this crank that you turn, and it has this tripod on wheels that holds the frame, so you can move it around, so it really makes the job easier.
It's probably well worth the money.
Yeah. You can get standard 4x8 sheets of drywall or 4x12, depending on how big your ceiling is, and you're going to create less joints to tape if you get bigger sheets. And then I would also lay it out. Sometimes just by turning your design, you're going to have less taping. You want to lay out your drywall so all the beveled edges are together for easy taping, because when you have those two bevels together, it creates this little divot that you fill with compound, you put your tape over it, and then you pull it smooth, and you're going to have to do a lot less taping, less coats of the compound, which is nice. If you're cutting, you want to tuck those cut edges into the corners if you can, so to keep your beveled edges together. And for electrical boxes in the ceiling, make sure you're using a mud ring or electrical box extender so that the box is flush with the drywall. An easy way to finish the drywall at the corner where the ceiling meets the wall is either with a tearaway plastic bead or a company called Straight Flex. It's S-T-R-A-I-T Flex. They have something called edge tape. So with the edge tape, this is a hard plastic edge on this drywall tape. You're going to put mud ceiling compound into your ceiling, keep it about a half an inch away from the wall. You're going to embed this edge tape into it, pull it tight, and then just finish that outside edge. You don't get compound anywhere near the wall. And so when that dries, it's already pre-primed, that hard edge. So once you feather this out, you don't have to use compound down the wall side. So it really makes it easy, because it's kind of hard to compound when you're pulling compound off the ceiling, then off the wall. You tend to pull it off each side, so it really eliminates a lot of work. And then with this tearaway plastic bead, this has a T-shaped plastic edge, and it has holes to accept the compound. You run it all the way down the ceiling side, and you just leave it, no compound on the wall. Once you finish it, all you have to do is tear away this plastic edge, and now you have a finished edge between the wall and the ceiling. So it's kind of a simple way to finish. If you have a ceiling with pops or cracks and you don't want to do a lot of finishing drywall, there's a few popular types of textured finishes that you can just put over an ugly ceiling. So
hide everything.
So popcorn, knockdown, and orange peel are probably the three most popular.
Are you going to explain any of that?
Popcorn ceilings use a texture made out of perlite, polystyrene, or styrofoam pieces in a variety of sizes, and they mix this into adhesive. And then you can rent a compressor and this gun that uses a hopper to spray it up onto the ceiling, or they've got a hopper style with a tube that goes to a gun that you can spray. And Homax, it's H-O-M-A-X, they've got a bunch of top-rated products, and you just mix this up, put it into the hopper and spray, and you've got to use a lot of drop cloths, and you've got to tape off the walls with plastic. Yeah, it's a little messy, but it definitely will cover any, ugly-looking ceilings. And then some popcorn ceilings are a mix that you add to paint and then just roll onto the ceiling. So it's going to give you the look of popcorn without having to spray and make such a mess. Homax and Behr, B-E-H-R, have a couple of top-rated interior textured paints, and they have fibers that cover up any small imperfections, and it's going to give that popcorn look. With a knockdown texture, this is joint compound that's thinned out. You're going to roll this onto the ceiling to form a stucco look, and then as it dries, or it starts to dry, you're going to use a long trowel or a squeegee, and you're going to lightly pull it over the compound to flatten it out, and you create this textured look. So it flattens it down rather than having those peaks. And then another approach is to use a textured sprayer and a compressor, and you're going to spray the ceiling with a thinned joint compound. You're going to allow it to set up for about 10-15 minutes, and then again you're going to pull it down, knock it down with a trowel or a squeegee. You can also get stucco rollers that have a looped surface to it, and that creates swirls and peaks. And then as it starts to dry after about 10-15 minutes, you can do the same thing, just kind of knock that down. With an orange peel ceiling, you're going to be using textured material to create a lightly bumpy surface. So you can either use textured paint that says orange peel, you can use thinned down joint compound, and you want to apply this very thin. And then what some painters do is they're just going to use a roller, and they're going to over apply the paint to create a slightly wavy orange peel look to the surface. But that takes a little more practice to get the right amount without dripping everywhere. But the key is with the orange peel look is you're just kind of, taking something and almost over applying it, so you're creating kind of a thick body over the surface of your ceiling, and then the texture of the roller cover itself is just creating this stippled look to it. Now, if you have any of these textures and you don't like them, you can just cover it with drywall and be done with it.
Well, can you scrape them off?
Well, for popcorn, you actually can scrape it off pretty easy. So if the builder did your popcorn ceiling and they didn't paint it, which a lot are that way, all you have to do is
That's how my ceiling was.
Right. All you have to do is get it moist, and it starts to come down very easy. So
It was a lot of fun painting the ceiling the first time.
Yeah, there's really a trick to it. So if you have a popcorn ceiling and you like it and you just want to repaint it because it needs painting, the key is moving fast. The first coat you get on, you got to go in one direction, apply the right amount of paint on your roller cover, and just keep moving, and then do not roll back over an area, because once you get popcorn wet, it wants to start peeling off. And once you get that first coat on, let it dry thoroughly. So give it a day or two. It's thoroughly dry, and then get a second coat on. And then once you cover it with a couple of coats of paint, then it's pretty solid. But if you want to remove a popcorn ceiling that hasn't been painted, I would fill a pump sprayer with water and then just spray a section at a time, let it set for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes.
A pump sprayer?
Yeah, a pump sprayer with water.
In your house?
Yeah, just lightly spray. Put a drop cloth down and use a pump sprayer. Yeah, you're just going to put.
This doesn't sound normal to me, JC.
No, just a fine. Yeah, it works great. Just put a fine mist on it. You don't have to go crazy. Wear goggles.
Just bring in the pressure washer
and
kit.
a rain suit. And then you're going to let that set for a few minutes, and then just scrape it off with a compound knife. So you're going to want to put down drop cloths. I would grab a mud pan, or even a paint tray I've used to hold underneath it as I scrape it off, and sections are going to come off pretty easy. If it's been painted, it's going to take a little more water and a little more time, but you can definitely get it off. If you have an area with a slightly damaged area of popcorn ceiling, or you started to paint it and you pulled off a section,
Whoops.
Zinsser, Zinsser, has a popcorn ceiling patch, and this comes in a tub, and you just apply it with a small putty knife, and you just put on a little at a time to match the surrounding popcorn. And sometimes you can use a paintbrush and just feather the edges, but that goes on pretty easy. You have to, make sure it matches first. And then Homax, Homax, they have a wide range of spray and roll textures. And with the spray, this is a professional product, comes in a can. It actually has polystyrene chips in it that are going to match most of the styles of popcorn. And you just shake this up and you spray it onto the ceiling in short little bursts, and it's going to match it. It does a really nice job.
A lot of these products are in like the joint compound area.
Rather than spray paint. Right. Yeah, very smart. If you have a knockdown texture, there's such a variety that then it's just a matter of getting some joint compound and some different size putty knives and kind of working into the spot, pulling it and shaping it and allowing it to dry.
So practice.
And you can use damp sponges to kind of feather it and shape it. The only tool I saw for knockdown texture is called the Pirate Patch tool.
No.
So this is a stencil with all these different shapes of knockdown texture on it, and you hold this over an area and you spread drywall compound over it, and then you pull off the excess, and then you remove the stencil, and it gives that shape of texture. It's really cool looking. And then you can use a paintbrush and feather the edges to blend it in with the other. Nice. So yeah, it does a really nice job. So it's kind of an interesting tool.
Let's hear about pirates.
You know why pirates wore patches?
No.
Was to retain their night vision. So when you're moving from daylight to dark space, it can take 5 or 6 minutes for your eyes to adjust. And then to fully adapt, it can take up to 25 minutes. So historians are now thinking that pirates were wearing patches over one eye to adapt that eye to the darkness. So they would storm a ship and drop down below deck, where it was usually very poorly lit. They would pull that eye patch off or swap it to the other eye, and it gave them a fighting advantage when they were below deck. So the FAA recommends pilots close one eye when they have to use a light in the cockpit to preserve the night vision in the other eye.
Oh, that makes me feel safe.
And then, like we talked about in the flashlight episode, red light flashlights or lanterns allow you to retain your night vision and move around.
How do we get that in the cockpit?
Yeah, right, rather than closing one eye. Another way to cover an ugly ceiling or cover exposed joists like in a basement is with a drop ceiling. And you can get a wide range of styles and textures and colors now. A traditional drop ceiling is going to have a metal grid system, and this is attached to the joists with wires, and then the panels are dropped into a framework. Or you can get a system that the tracks are actually screwed into the joists or right into the ceiling, and then your panels are held in place with clips.
Oh, interesting.
Drop ceilings are also nice if you're creating a home theater or running cables or wiring, so everything can be covered up with those panels.
And it's easy access to it again, too.
Yeah, very smart. So the ceiling tiles, you can get it so it sounds proof and increases the sound quality of your home theater, or if you have an audio system. And for some rooms, just lowering that ceiling and adding panels can make it more comfortable in the summer and the winter. And many of these drop ceilings, they only need about 3 inches of clearance to hang the framework if you don't want to lower it too much.
Right.
And then make sure you're looking at your lighting before you start.
Probably a big decision.
Well, some of the can lighting can actually be dangerous. It can create too much heat and create a fire hazard. So you really need to think about the lighting. And what's great about all this new LED lighting is they have LED ceiling light panels now that come in 2 foot by 2 or 2 by 4. They're either called drop light panels or drop grid flat panels. Very easy to install, long-lasting, low energy, and they're going to throw all this light, and you don't have to worry about the heat generated by some of these cans.
Nice.
To put in a drop ceiling, you're going to have to make a level line for the height all along the walls, and then you're going to attach wall molding, and then you're going to screw in fasteners to the joists, and that's going to hold wires that's going to support the frame. Armstrong has something called their Easy Up ceiling system. So this can go right over an existing ceiling, and you're going to screw this into the joists, or if you have an unfinished area, you can screw this straight into the joists all across the ceiling. And clips are going to slide on these tracks, and it holds these tongue and groove tiles or planks in place. So they have just small tiles, 16 by 16 or 24 by 24, or these larger planks, 6 inches by 48 or 5 inches by 84.
Wow.
And so you're covering a lot at one time, and you can get a wide variety of wood, wood colors, white, textured. They have tin-looking ceiling panels.
Ooh.
So just a very interesting system and very easy to do. So you don't have to have all the wires, cut each one, and shape it to the correct size. So it seems like a very nice system. A couple other systems are Ceiling Connex, so it's CONNEX, and Ceiling Max. And these are interlocking T-systems, so they're a grid that can be stapled or screwed into place. And with the Ceiling Max, this can go direct to a joist or ceiling. So these are really nice for low ceilings and basements. You don't have to worry about that extra space with a drop ceiling.
Nice.
You can also get acoustical ceiling tiles to control the sound if you have a home theater or a loud stereo or gaming, and it's going to help block the sound between floors.
So this would be good in a basement?
Yeah, they do a nice job. And what you're looking for is the CAC rating, so it's Ceiling Attenuation Class. For ceiling tiles, it's rated between 0 and 45. 30 or higher is good. That's what you're looking for. And then there's also NRC, the noise reduction coefficient. It's a scale between 0 and 1. 0.7 and higher is what you're looking for. If you want to paint some old drop ceilings or acoustical ceiling tiles, you can either use a spray gun or spray paint. And a lot of these new cans have nozzles that shoot straight up.
Right.
So it makes it very convenient.
Or you can go to a home center and pick up replacement tiles.
Right, absolutely.
Do you have anything else to add?
For water spots on ceilings, I would use a shellac-based primer, and that's going to prevent the stain from bleeding through the paint. A standard primer, a latex-based, isn't going to be effective on water because of the minerals in it.
Probably got some bigger problems, too, than just the water stuff.
Right. And then for popcorn ceilings, I would use a shellac in a spray can. It's going to be the easiest to do with popcorn.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, the Google Play Music app, and iHeartRadio.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.